The kidney was still bleeding inside him when Kalen heard her say it. He was sitting in the post-op recovery room, his abdomen screaming with every shallow breath, morphine drip failing to touch the deeper pain that wasn't physical. The nurses had wheeled him down the hall against protocol because he'd begged, literally begged on his knees in a hospital gown, to be near her when she woke up. They said 5 minutes. Just 5. Elira's eyes fluttered open behind the oxygen mask. Her lips moved, dry, cracked, forming a word he couldn't quite hear. He leaned closer, ignoring the tearing sensation in his side. Dorian. Not Kalen. Not baby or thank you or I love you. Dorian. And the way she smiled, soft, distant, like she was somewhere he'd never been invited, made something inside Kalen snap clean in half. True hearts. If you've ever given everything to someone and wondered if they were even thinking about you, tap that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will shatter you. And I need you here with me when it does. Drop A if you're already hooked. The surgery had been 3 days ago. 72 hours since they'd cut Kalen open like a fish and pulled out one of his kidneys, healthy, pink, functioning, and placed it inside his dying wife. The doctors said he was a hero. The nurses called him selfless. His mother cried on the phone and said God would remember this. But nobody asked him the question that mattered. What if she doesn't want to be saved by you? Kalen Dorsey was 38 years old, built like someone who'd spent his life under car hoods and carrying transmission cases. His hands were scarred from years of mechanic work at Jimmy's Auto in Trenton. He wasn't a romantic, didn't write poetry or surprise Elira with flowers every week, but he showed up. Every single day for 13 years, he showed up. When Elira got diagnosed with autoimmune kidney disease 18 months ago, Kalen didn't flinch. He took on double shifts, sold his truck, pawned his father's watch. He sat through every appointment, every blood draw, every specialist who looked at them with pity and said, "We'll try." The transplant list was a joke. Over 90,000 people waiting. Elira's blood type was rare. Her disease was aggressive. Time was a countdown clock he couldn't pause. So he made the only choice that made sense. He got tested. Perfect match. The doctors warned him about complications, about recovery time, about the risk of living with one kidney. He signed the papers anyway. Not because he was brave, because losing her wasn't an option his brain could process. But now, watching her smile at a name that wasn't his, Kalen realized something cold and suffocating. Maybe she was already lost. Elira Dorsey, born Elira Tanner, was 34 years old and looked like someone who belonged in a coffee shop with a leather journal and too many thoughts. She had dark hair that fell in waves she never bothered to style, gray-green eyes that seemed to see through people, and a soft voice that made students cry in her office when she told them they mattered. She was a high school guidance counselor, the kind kids wrote thank you letters to years later, the kind who remembered birthdays and brought homemade cookies to parent meetings. Kalen fell in love with her at a community art fair when he was 25. She'd been sketching a bird that didn't exist, and when he asked why, she said, "Because I can." That answer hooked him for life. They got married 2 years later in a courthouse ceremony with 6 people present. No drama, no big speeches, just 2 people who fit. Or so he thought. The name Dorian didn't come up again that first day. Elira drifted in and out of sedation, her body adjusting to the new organ, her vitals monitored every hour. Kalen stayed in the chair beside her bed, even though his own body was shaking from pain and exhaustion. When she finally woke up fully that evening, she looked at him with confusion. "Kalen?" "Yeah, baby, I'm here." "What? What happened? You got a kidney. You're gonna be okay. Her eyes filled with tears. From who? He reached for her hand, his own trembling. From me. She stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. Then she cried. Deep, body-shaking sobs that the nurses said were normal. Just emotional release from the trauma. But Kaylin noticed something. She didn't say, thank you. She didn't say, I love you. She just cried. And when she finally stopped, she asked, did anyone else visit me? Just your mom and Carla from work. No one else? No. Why? She turned her face toward the window. I thought I heard someone. Recovery was supposed to take weeks. Kaylin was discharged after 5 days with a prescription for painkillers he barely took and instructions to avoid heavy lifting for 3 months. Elira stayed another week for observation. When she came home, she was different. Not physically, though she'd lost weight and moved slower, but something in her eyes had shifted. She was distant, distracted, like she was listening to a conversation Kaylin couldn't hear. One night, 2 weeks post-surgery, he woke up to find her sitting on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m., staring at her phone. You okay? She jumped, nearly dropping the device. Yeah, just couldn't sleep. What are you looking at? Nothing. Just scrolling. But when he glanced over her shoulder, the screen was blank. The name came back 3 nights later. Kaylin woke to the sound of her voice, soft and slurred with sleep. I missed you, Dorian. I'm sorry. His blood turned to ice. He didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. She laughed, a quiet, girlish sound he hadn't heard in years. I know I can't. But I still... Then, silence. When he finally looked over, her eyes were closed, dreaming. But the smile on her face was real. Kaylin spent the next morning pretending everything was fine. Made coffee, kissed her forehead, asked how she slept. Good, she said. Really good, actually. Any dreams? She paused, fork halfway to her mouth. Why? You were talking in your sleep. Her face went pale. What did I say? Nothing clear, just mumbling. She relaxed. Oh, probably the meds. But Kaylin saw it. The flicker of relief. The lie. Who is Dorian? And why does his name live in her dreams? True hearts, I promise you. This is just the beginning. If you're ready to go deeper, leave a comment and tell me, would you want to know the truth or stay blind? Kaylin started keeping a journal. Not the kind with feelings and reflections. He wasn't that guy. This was a log. Dates. Times. Observations. Evidence of something he couldn't yet name, but could feel crawling under his skin like an infection. November 3rd, 2:17 a.m. Said Dorian twice. Smiled. Didn't wake up. November 5th, evening. Asked if we'd ever been to Maine. We haven't. She looked confused when I said no. November 8th, new phone. Said old one was too cluttered. Wiped everything. He kept the journal in his truck, buried under the passenger seat between empty coffee cups and shop rags. Every entry felt like a betrayal, like he was spying on his own wife. But what else was he supposed to do? Pretend he hadn't heard her whisper another man's name with more tenderness than she'd shown him in months? The kidney inside her was his. A piece of him was literally keeping her alive. And she was using that life to think about someone else. 3 weeks post-surgery, Elira went back to work part-time. The school welcomed her like a returning war hero. Balloons in her office. A banner that said, "Welcome back, Mrs. Dorsey." Kids hugged her in the hallways. Teachers brought casseroles. Kaylin picked her up that first day, watching her walk toward the car with a smile he hadn't seen in over a year. She looked lighter, happier. Good day? He asked. Really good. It felt normal again. That's great, baby. She leaned over and kissed his cheek. Thank you. For everything. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like a consolation prize. That night, Kalen couldn't sleep. His incision site ached. A dull, persistent throb the doctors said was normal, but felt like punishment. He got up, poured a glass of water, and stood in the kitchen staring at nothing. Elira's purse was on the counter. He didn't plan it, didn't think about it, just reached in and pulled out her phone. Locked. He tried her birthday, their anniversary, her mom's birthday. Nothing. Then he tried something else. Dorian. 6 letters. The phone unlocked. His hands started shaking. The messages were clean. Too clean. No suspicious texts. No hidden apps. Just work emails, grocery reminders, and a group chat with her teacher friends. But the photo gallery was different. Most of it was normal. Pictures of their house, her students' artwork, random shots of their dog. But buried deep in a folder labeled Old Backup were images he'd never seen. Elira standing on a dock, barefoot, wearing a white sundress. Elira laughing in a field of wildflowers, her hair messy and windblown. Elira asleep in a hammock. Someone's hand resting on her shoulder. Just the hand, not the person. And one more. A man's back, walking away toward a cabin in the woods. The photo was taken from behind, but Kalen could see the edge of his profile. Dark hair, tall, wearing a faded green jacket. The timestamp on the photos was from 6 years ago, right around the time Elira went to that mental wellness retreat after her father died. Kalen put the phone back exactly where he found it, went to the bathroom, stared at himself in the mirror. His face looked older, hollowed out, like someone had scooped out everything soft and left only the bones. He thought about confronting her, demanding answers, but something stopped him. What if she lies? What if she looked him in the eye and said it was nothing, just old memories, just a phase, just something she'd already let go? What if he had to choose between believing her or trusting his gut? He wasn't ready for that choice. Not yet. The package arrived 4 days later. Kalen was at work when the doorbell camera pinged. A delivery truck. A small box left on the porch. No return address. He came home early, told Elira he had a headache. She was in the shower. He grabbed the box before she saw it. Inside was a vintage leather sketchbook, the kind artists used decades ago. The pages were thick, cream-colored, rough-edged. All of them were blank, except the last one. A pencil drawing, detailed, intimate, impossibly precise. Elira, asleep in a hospital bed, tubes in her arms, hair falling across her face, and a hand resting over hers, not Kalen's hand. The fingers were longer, the knuckles more pronounced. At the bottom of the page, in small, careful handwriting, I kept the promise. Can you? Kalen's vision blurred, his pulse hammered in his ears. He flipped back through the pages, looking for more, but they were empty. Just that one drawing, that one message. He checked the box again, found a shipping label with a return address, a P.O. box in Burlington, Vermont. Elira had never been to Vermont. Or had she? When Elira came out of the shower, Kalen was sitting on the couch, the box hidden under a cushion. You okay? She asked, toweling her hair. Yeah, just tired. You've been working too much. You need to rest. Doctor's orders. I know. She sat beside him, rested her head on his shoulder. I'm really glad you're here, Kalen. I don't say it enough, but I am. He wrapped his arm around her, feeling the warmth of her body against his, and hated himself for wondering if she was pretending too. That night, after Elira fell asleep, Kalen went to his truck and opened his laptop. searched for the P.O. box address, cross-referenced it with public records, social media, anything he could find. Nothing. Then he tried something else. He reverse image searched the drawing using a photo he took with his phone. One result. An artist's portfolio website. Minimalist. Black background. White text. Dorian Vale. Visual storytelling. Kalin clicked. The site was sparse. A few charcoal sketches. Some oil paintings. All of them haunting. Empty roads. Abandoned houses. Women with their faces turned away. And then he saw it. A painting titled, "The One I Let Go." A woman sitting on a dock at sunset, her back to the viewer, her hair falling in waves. It was Elira. Every curve, every detail. Unmistakable. Kalin didn't sleep that night, didn't close his eyes once. By morning, he'd made a decision. He called in sick to work. Told Elira he was going to visit his brother upstate for the weekend. She seemed relieved. Said she needed to catch up on grading anyway. He packed a bag and drove to Vermont. Burlington. Vermont was the kind of place people moved to when they wanted to disappear. Old brick buildings, coffee shops with names like the Wandering Bean, streets lined with trees that looked like they'd been planted before the country had a name. Kalin hated it immediately. He parked outside the post office at 7 a.m. and waited. The plan was simple. Watch the P.O. box, see who picked up the mail, follow them. No confrontation. Not yet. Just information. 3 hours passed. His back ached. His incision site throbbed. He drank gas station coffee that tasted like burnt plastic and tried not to think about what he'd do if Elira called. At 10:23 a.m., a man walked in. Tall, lean, mid-30s, dark hair that fell just past his ears, wearing that same faded green jacket from the photo. He moved like someone who had nowhere to be, but also nowhere to rush to. Kalin's hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. The man came out 5 minutes later holding a stack of mail. Walked 2 blocks to a studio apartment above a used bookstore. Unlocked the door and disappeared inside. Kalin sat in his truck for 20 minutes, trying to breathe. Then he got out. The bookstore was closed. Kalin walked around back, found a fire escape, climbed it. Stupid. Reckless. The kind of thing that could get him arrested. He didn't care. The window was cracked open. He peered inside. The apartment was small. 1 room. Hardwood floors covered in paint-stained drop cloths. Canvases everywhere. Leaning against walls, stacked in corners, hanging from makeshift wire displays. And on the far wall, above a cluttered desk, was a framed photograph. Elira and the man sitting on a dock, her head on his shoulder, the sun setting behind them. Both of them smiling like they'd just discovered something the rest of the world hadn't figured out yet. Kalin's chest caved in. He climbed back down, walked to his truck, sat there for an hour staring at nothing. Then he Googled Dorian Vale, Vermont. One result, a local art exhibit from 4 years ago. A small write-up in a community newspaper. Local artist Dorian Vale showcases emotional landscapes at Pine Street Gallery. Vale, who moved to Burlington 6 years ago, describes his work as visual grief, capturing what we lose when we choose safety over truth. 6 years ago. The same time Elira went to her retreat. Kalin drove back to Trenton in silence. No music, no podcasts, just the hum of the engine and the steady thrum of rage building in his skull. When he got home, Elira was asleep on the couch, papers spread around her, red pens still in her hand. He stood in the doorway watching her. She looked peaceful, innocent, like she hadn't ripped his heart out and left it bleeding on a dock in Vermont. The next morning, Kalin went back to work. Pretended everything was normal. Changed oil. Rotated tires. talked to customers about brake pads and engine trouble, but inside he was building something. A plan. Not revenge. Not yet. Just clarity. He started small. Asked Elira casual questions over dinner. "You ever think about that retreat you went to after your dad died?" She looked up from her plate, eyes careful. "Sometimes." "Why?" "Just wondering if it helped. You seemed different when you came back." "Different how?" "I don't know. Calmer, I guess." She smiled. Soft. Sad. "I needed to be someone else for a while. It helped." "Someone else?" "You know what I mean. Away from all the pressure. The grief." "Did you meet anyone there?" Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Like who?" "I don't know. Other people dealing with loss?" "A few. No one I stayed in touch with." Lie. He could see it in the way she looked away, the way her jaw tightened. "That's good," he said. "I'm glad it helped." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Kaylin. I hope you know that." He squeezed back and felt nothing. That night, Elira fell asleep early. Kaylin waited until her breathing deepened, then pulled out his laptop. He spent 3 hours combing through her social media archives, old Facebook posts, deleted Instagram photos recovered through cached pages, LinkedIn connections she'd never mentioned. And then he found it. A comment on a post from 6 years ago. A friend asking, "How was Maine?" Elira's reply, "Life-changing. Wish I could stay forever. Maine, not Vermont." Kaylin cross-referenced the dates, found a small cabin rental near Acadia National Park listed under D. Vale during the same 2-month window Elira was supposedly at a retreat. His hands shook as he zoomed in on the rental photos, the dock from the picture, the wildflower field, the hammock, all of it, right there. He didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, he did something worse. He called the retreat center she'd supposedly attended. A kind woman answered, "Green Pines Wellness Retreat. How can I help you?" "Hi, I'm trying to confirm my wife attended a program there about 6 years ago. Her name is Elira Dorsey, formerly Elira Tanner." Typing sounds. A pause. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't see anyone by that name in our records." "Can you check again? It would have been summer of 2019. More typing. "No, sir. No record of anyone with that name." Kaylin thanked her and hung up, sat in his truck in the work parking lot, and laughed. Not because it was funny, because he'd been living in a lie so perfect he almost admired it. Kaylin stopped pretending. Not outwardly. He still kissed Elira goodbye in the mornings, still asked about her day, still slept beside her at night. But inside, he'd flipped a switch, stopped hoping for explanations, stopped making excuses for her distance. He was done wondering. Now, he just needed proof. The opportunity came 2 weeks later. Elira's school was hosting a weekend conference in Philadelphia. She'd be gone Friday night through Sunday afternoon. Leadership training for counselors. She'd mentioned it casually over breakfast, like it was nothing. "You'll be okay on your own?" she asked, packing her bag. "Yeah, I'll catch up on some projects." She kissed his forehead. "Love you." "Love you too." He waited until her car disappeared down the street. Then he moved. Kaylin had never been the kind of man who went through his wife's things. Never checked her phone without permission. Never doubted her when she said she was working late. But that version of himself died the moment she said Dorian's name. He started in the bedroom, pulled out dresser drawers, checked under the mattress, felt along the top shelf of the closet. Nothing. Just clothes and shoes and dust. The office was next. Elira's desk was neat, too neat. Color-coded folders, pens in a cup, laptop closed and charging. He opened it, password protected. He tried Dorian again. Wrong. Then he tried the date from the photos, June 14th, 2019. The screen unlocked. The laptop was a graveyard of deleted files and cleared browser history. But Kalen wasn't a mechanic for nothing. He knew how to dig. He opened the trash folder, found a document titled Things I Can't Say. His finger hovered over the mouse. Don't open it. You don't want to know. But he did. He clicked. The document was a letter. Unsent. Undated. But the words were fresh, like they'd been written yesterday. Dorian, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't even know if I'll ever send it. But I need to put this somewhere before it eats me alive. I think about you every day. I know I'm not supposed to. I know I made my choice 6 years ago when I came home to Kalen. I know I convinced myself I was doing the right thing. Being responsible, being an adult, choosing stability over chaos. But God, I miss the chaos. I miss waking up in that cabin and not knowing what we'd do that day. I miss the way you looked at me like I was the only person who'd ever mattered. I miss feeling like I could breathe without apologizing for it. Kalen is a good man. He saved my life. Literally. And I feel like a monster for saying this, but I wish he hadn't. Because now I owe him everything. And I don't know how to live in a debt that big. I don't know how to love someone when part of me is still standing on that dock with you, watching the sun go down and believing we had forever. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I'm not free, and I don't think I ever will be. Kalen read it 3 times. Then he closed the laptop, walked to the bathroom, and threw up. He didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't punch a wall or break anything. He just sat on the floor, back against the tub, staring at the tiles. I wish he hadn't. She wished he hadn't saved her life. The kidney inside her, his kidney, the piece of himself he'd given because he loved her more than he loved breathing, was a burden to her. A chain. A debt she resented. Kalen spent the rest of the weekend in a fog. Barely ate. Didn't sleep. Just sat in the living room with the lights off, replaying every moment of the last 13 years, searching for the cracks he'd missed, the signs he'd ignored, the truth he'd been too stupid to see. By Sunday morning, something had shifted. The pain was still there, the betrayal, the rage, but underneath it was something colder. Clarity. Elira came home that afternoon, exhausted and chatty, told him about the workshops, the keynote speaker, the terrible hotel coffee. He listened, nodded, smiled when he was supposed to, and when she asked if he was okay, he said, "Yeah, just tired." She hugged him. "You've been through so much. I'm sorry I haven't been more present." "It's okay. I'm going to do better. I promise." He held her tighter, and felt nothing. That night, after Elira fell asleep, Kalen opened his laptop and started researching. Property records, bank accounts, legal documents. He wasn't planning revenge, he was planning an exit, because he finally understood something he should have known from the beginning. You can't make someone love you by giving them pieces of yourself. You can only lose yourself trying. The divorce papers arrived in his inbox 3 days later. Drafted, reviewed, ready to file. He read through them twice, checked every clause, every detail. She'd get the house, half the savings, full custody of the dog. He'd get his freedom. And maybe, eventually, his life back. But Kalen didn't file them. Not yet. Because 2 hours after he saved the documents to his desktop, something happened. A knock at the door. He opened it. And standing on the porch, looking exactly like the man from the photograph, was Dorian Vale. Kalen didn't move. Couldn't move. Just stood there in the doorway staring at the man who'd been living in his wife's head for 6 years. The man whose name she whispered in her sleep. The man she'd rather be indebted to than saved by her own husband. Dorian Vale looked exactly like his photos. Tall, lean, dark hair falling past his ears. In that careless way, artists wore their messiness like a statement. But up close, Kalin could see the details the pictures missed. The tiredness around his eyes. The slight tremor in his hands. The way he stood like someone who'd walked a very long distance and wasn't sure he'd reached the right place. "You're Kalin," Dorian said. Not a question. A confirmation. "And you're the man my wife dreams about." Dorian flinched. "Good. Can we talk?" "Why the hell would I want to talk to you?" "Because I need to tell you the truth." "And she never will." Kalin should have slammed the door, should have called the cops, should have done anything except what he did next. He stepped aside. Let Dorian walk into his house, into his living room, into the space where he and Elira had built 13 years of what he'd thought was a real marriage. They sat across from each other, Kalin on the couch, Dorian in the chair by the window. Neither spoke for a full minute. Finally, Dorian broke the silence. "She told you about Maine?" "She told me about a grief retreat that doesn't exist." Dorian closed his eyes. "Of course she did." "How long?" 2 months, June through August, 2019. "And you've been in contact since?" "No." Dorian's voice cracked. "Not once. Not until 3 weeks ago." Kalin's jaw tightened. "The sketchbook. I shouldn't have sent it. I know that now. But I saw the news story about her transplant, about you being the donor, and I—" He trailed off, staring at his hands. "I needed her to know I was still here, that I kept my promise." "What promise?" Dorian looked up, and for the first time Kalin saw something in his eyes that wasn't guilt or shame. It was grief, raw, unfiltered, the kind that doesn't fade with time. "That I'd wait," Dorian said quietly. "That if she ever wanted to come back, I'd be there." Kalin stood up, paced to the window, looked out at the street where Elira would be driving home in less than an hour. "She chose me," he said, voice flat. "6 years ago, she came home. To me." "I know." "So why are you here?" "Because she's dying." The words hit Kalin like a fist to the throat. "What?" Dorian pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket, handed it to Kalin. It was a medical report, recent, dated 4 days ago. Patient, Elira Dorsey. Diagnosis, acute transplant rejection. Prognosis, poor without immediate intervention. Kalin's hands shook as he read. "She didn't tell you," Dorian said softly. "No." "She's been experiencing symptoms for weeks. Fatigue, nausea, pain. But she's been hiding it because she doesn't want you to feel guilty." "How do you know this?" "She called me 2 weeks after she woke up from surgery. Said she needed to talk to someone who wouldn't ask questions." Kalin crumpled the paper in his fist. "You mean someone who wasn't me?" I didn't want to answer, but I couldn't let it go to voicemail. Not when I heard her voice. Kalin turned around, eyes burning. "Why are you really here, Dorian? To rub it in? To tell me she loves you more? To take her back now that I've saved her life so you don't have to?" "No." Dorian stood up, and there was something broken in the way he moved. "I'm here because I can't live with this anymore. With knowing she's trapped between us. With knowing my promise is the chain keeping her from being happy with you. She's not happy with me. She resents me. She doesn't resent you. She resents herself. What's the difference?" Dorian stepped closer, and Kalin noticed for the first time that the man's eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been crying recently. A lot. "The difference is that she's punishing herself for wanting something she thinks she doesn't deserve. And it's killing her. Literally. Before Kaylin could respond, the front door opened. Elira walked in, keys jangling, purse over her shoulder, exhausted smile on her face. "Kale, I'm—" She froze. Saw Dorian. And the color drained from her face so fast, Kaylin thought she might collapse. "What?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "What are you doing here?" Dorian didn't answer, just looked at her like she was something sacred he'd lost the right to touch. Kaylin watched his wife, watched the way her chest rose and fell too quickly, the way her hands trembled, the way her eyes darted between them like she was calculating escape routes. And he knew. Everything Dorian had said was true. "Elira," Kaylin said, voice calm in a way that scared even him. "When were you going to tell me you're rejecting the kidney?" Her face crumpled. "Kaylin, when were you going to tell me that the piece of me inside you is dying? That my sacrifice meant nothing?" "It's not nothing. It's just what? Just not enough? Just not him?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" His voice rose, breaking. "Because I gave you everything, Elira. Everything. And you can't even look at me without wishing I was someone else." "That's not true." "Then why is his name the first thing you said when you woke up? Why is his password on your phone? Why do you have letters saved on your laptop saying you wish I hadn't saved your life?" She staggered backward like he'd struck her. Dorian moved toward her instinctively, but Kaylin stepped between them. "Don't." His voice was ice. "Don't you dare." Elira sank onto the couch, head in her hands, sobbing. Kaylin stood there, watching her fall apart, and felt something inside him finally snap clean. Not with rage, with exhaustion. "I'm done," he said quietly. She looked up, mascara streaking her face. "What?" "I'm done fighting for someone who doesn't want to be fought for." "Kaylin, please." "You're free, Elira. That's what you wanted, right? Freedom?" "No, Yes, you do. You've wanted it since the day you came back from Maine. You've been a prisoner in this marriage, and I've been the warden keeping you here with guilt and loyalty and a kidney you never asked for. That's not fair." "None of this is fair." His voice cracked. "But I'm done pretending. I'm done being the man you settled for because you were too scared to choose the one you actually loved." He turned to Dorian, who stood frozen by the door. "Take her," Kaylin said. "Take her and leave. Give her the life she actually wants." "Kaylin, stop!" Elira stood, reaching for him. He stepped back. "I mean it. I'll sign whatever papers you need. You can have the house, the savings, everything. Just go." "I don't want to go. I want—" "What? To keep both of us? To have me as your safety net while you dream about him every night? I won't do it anymore." Dorian finally spoke, voice shaking. "I didn't come here to take her from you." "Then why did you come?" "To let her go." The room went silent. Elira stared at Dorian, eyes wide. "What?" Dorian turned to her, and the look on his face was pure devastation. "I thought I was doing the right thing by waiting, by keeping the promise. But all I've done is trap you in the past." He took a shaky breath. "You need to move forward, Elira. With him or without him. But not with me haunting you." "No." Her voice broke. "No, you don't get to decide that. Someone has to. Because you won't." She crossed the room, grabbed his arm. "I called you because I was scared, because I didn't know if I'd survive the rejection, and I needed to hear your voice one more time. But that doesn't mean—" "It means everything," Dorian said gently. "It means you're still living in that cabin, still sitting on that dock, and you'll never leave as long as I'm an option." Kaylin watched them, watched the way Elira's hand gripped Dorian's sleeve, the way Dorian looked at her like she was light itself, and he understood. This wasn't about him being good enough. It wasn't even about Dorian being better. It was about Elira being too terrified to choose at all. "I'm leaving," Kaylin said suddenly. Both of them turned to look at him. "I'm leaving for a few days, maybe a week. And when I come back, I want an answer." He looked at Elira. "Not about who you want. About who you're brave enough to fight for. Because I'm done being someone's second choice. And I'm done being the reason you hate yourself." "Kaylin!" "No." He grabbed his keys from the counter. "Figure it out. Both of you. Figure out what you actually want. Because I can't do this anymore." He walked to the door, paused, looked back one last time. "And Elira? Get to a hospital. Have them check the rejection markers. Because whether you choose me or him or nobody, I'm not letting you die because you're too proud to ask for help." Then he left, drove to his truck, and didn't look back. True hearts, the storm has finally hit. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot. If you're feeling everything I'm feeling right now, drop a in the comments. And if you think Kaylin made the right call, let me know. We're heading into the final act, and I need you with me. Hit that subscribe button because episode 6 will break you in ways you're not ready for. Kaylin drove for 3 hours before he realized he had no destination. Just drove. Highway stretching endlessly under dim streetlights. Radio off, windows down, cold November air biting his face. His phone buzzed 17 times in the first hour. Elira's name lighting up the screen over and over. "Please come home. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. Kaylin, please." He didn't answer. By the time he pulled into a motel parking lot somewhere outside Harrisburg, the messages had stopped. The room smelled like cigarettes and cleaning chemicals that didn't quite mask the cigarettes. Kaylin sat on the edge of the bed, still in his jacket, staring at the wall. His phone buzzed again. Not Elira this time. A number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Hello?" "Kaylin, it's Dorian." Kaylin's grip tightened on the phone. "How did you get this number?" "From Elira's phone, before I left." "You left?" A pause. "Yeah, about an hour after you did." "Where's Elira?" "Home, alone. She's not good, man." Kaylin closed his eyes. "Not my problem anymore. I know you don't believe that. Why are you calling me?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Because I need you to understand something," Dorian said, voice rough. "I love her. I've loved her since the day she showed up at that cabin 6 years ago, looking like the world had broken her, and she was trying to glue herself back together with duct tape and denial." "Great. Thanks for sharing. But she doesn't love me the way you think she does." Kaylin laughed bitterly. "Really?" "Because the letters and the dreams and the passwords say otherwise. She loves the version of herself she was with me, the version that didn't have responsibilities or guilt or expectations. But that version isn't real. It's a fantasy, a 2-month vacation from her actual life." "And what's her actual life? Me? The guy she resents?" "The guy she chose," Dorian said quietly. "Even when choosing you meant giving up the fantasy. Even when it hurt." Kaylin stood up, paced the tiny motel room. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I saw the divorce papers on your laptop screen before I left. And I need you to know that if you file them, you're not setting her free. You're just confirming what she already believes about herself. Which is that she doesn't deserve to be loved unconditionally. That everyone who loves her is just waiting for the moment she disappoints them so they can leave." Kaylin stopped pacing. Her dad. Yeah, he walked out when she was 16, told her she wasn't worth the trouble. She spent the rest of her life trying to prove him wrong by being perfect for everyone. Perfect daughter, perfect girlfriend, perfect wife. But perfection is exhausting. And when her dad died, she broke. So she ran to you. She ran to a version of herself that didn't have to be perfect. And I let her. Because I was selfish. Because I wanted her, even though I knew she was running from something instead of running toward me. Kaylin sat back down on the bed. What do you want from me, Dorian? I want you to go back. Not because you owe her, but because she needs to see that someone can know all her broken pieces and still choose to stay. I gave her a kidney. What more proof does she need? That wasn't a choice. That was survival instinct. You saved her because losing her would have destroyed you. But choosing her after you know the truth, after you know she's not perfect, that's love. I'm tired of being the only one fighting for this marriage. Then make her fight too. But don't walk away before she has the chance. Kaylin hung up without saying goodbye, sat in silence for 20 minutes, then pulled out his laptop and deleted the divorce papers. Not because Dorian convinced him, but because he realized something. He didn't want to leave. He wanted her to choose to stay. And that meant giving her the space to make a real choice. Kaylin stayed at the motel for 3 days. During that time, Elira called twice. He answered once. "Where are you?" she asked, voice small. "Away." "Are you coming back?" "I don't know yet." Silence. "I went to the hospital," she said finally. "You were right. The rejection markers are elevated. They're adjusting my medication, talking about a second transplant if it doesn't improve." "Good." "Kaylin, I'm glad you're getting help, Elira. I mean that. I'm so sorry. For everything. For lying. For being selfish. For—" "Don't apologize yet," he interrupted. "Apologize when you've figured out what you actually want. I want you. You say that now. But I need to know you mean it. That you're not just saying it because I'm the safe option. Because I'm here, and he's not." "He left because I asked him to." Kaylin's chest tightened. "What?" "After you drove off, we talked for hours. And I realized I've been using him as an escape hatch. A fantasy I could retreat into whenever real life got too hard. But that's not fair to him. And it's not fair to you." "What did you tell him?" "That I loved him for giving me permission to fall apart. But that I loved you for helping me put myself back together. And that I needed to let him go so I could actually be present in my own life." Kaylin didn't respond for a long time. "Where is he now?" he finally asked. "Back in Vermont. He said he's closing the P.O. box, deleting my number, moving on." "Do you believe him?" "I think he wants to. And I think I owe it to both of you to actually let him." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done living in the past. Done pretending I can have both. You're my husband, Kaylin. And if you'll let me, I want to actually be your wife. Not the version I think you want, the real one, messy and broken and still figuring things out." Kaylin closed his eyes. "I'll come home tomorrow," he said. "Okay. But Elira, if I come back, we're starting over. No more secrets, no more half-truths. You tell me everything, the good, the bad, the stuff you think will make me leave. All of it. I will. I promise. And if you can't do that, if you need to keep pieces of yourself locked away, then we need to end this. Because I won't spend the rest of my life wondering if I'm enough." Her voice cracked. "You are enough. You've always been enough. I just didn't know how to let you see the parts of me that weren't." Kaylin drove home the next afternoon. When he pulled into the driveway, Elira was sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a blanket, hair messy, eyes red. She stood when she saw him. He got out of the truck. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then she crossed the yard and wrapped her arms around him. "I'm sorry," she whispered against his chest. "I'm so sorry." He held her, tight. Like if he let go, she might disappear again. "I know," he said quietly. "Me too." They went inside, sat at the kitchen table, and she told him everything. About meeting Dorian at a grief support group in Maine, about the cabin, about falling in love with someone who didn't expect her to be strong, about coming home because she knew the fantasy couldn't last, about spending 6 years trying to forget him and failing, about the phone call 2 weeks after surgery when she panicked and reached out because she didn't know if she'd survive and needed to say goodbye, about the guilt that had been eating her alive ever since. Kaylin listened, didn't interrupt, didn't get angry, just listened. When she finished, she looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "Do you hate me?" "No." "Do you still love me?" He took a breath. "I don't know. Not the way I used to. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we need to figure out how to love each other as the people we actually are, not the people we thought we married." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "What do we do now?" "We start over. Slow. Honest. No pressure to fix everything overnight. And if it doesn't work, then at least we tried." Elira reached across the table and took his hand. For the first time in months, Kaylin didn't pull away. Rebuilding a marriage is nothing like building one the first time. The first time, you're running on hope and chemistry and the blind faith that love conquers all. You don't see the cracks because you're too busy staring at the view. The second time, you're standing in the rubble with a blueprint that no longer makes sense, trying to figure out if the foundation is even worth saving. Kaylin and Elira spent the first week in careful silence. They moved around each other like roommates who'd signed a lease they couldn't break. Polite, distant, cautious with every word. She made coffee in the mornings. He thanked her. He cooked dinner at night. She cleaned the dishes. They slept in the same bed, but on opposite sides, a canyon of space between them that neither knew how to cross. It was Elira who broke first. 10 days after Kaylin came home, she walked into the garage where he was working on his truck and said, "I can't do this anymore." He looked up from under the hood, wrench in hand. "Can't do what?" "This." She gestured between them. "The tiptoeing. The pretending we're fine when we're not. I feel like I'm walking on glass, and every step is wrong." Kaylin set the wrench down, wiped his hands on a rag. "What do you want me to do, Elira? Pretend I'm not still angry? Pretend it doesn't hurt every time I look at you and remember that I wasn't enough?" "No. I want you to yell at me. I want you to tell me I'm selfish and horrible, and that you hate me. I want you to feel something instead of just existing next to me." "You want me to yell at you?" "Yes." "Why? So you can feel like you're being punished? So the guilt feels justified?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Maybe. I don't know. I just can't stand this silence." Kaylin stared at her. At the woman he'd loved for 13 years. The woman he'd cut himself open for. The woman who'd nearly destroyed him. And something inside him finally cracked. "You want honesty?" His voice was low, controlled. "Fine. Here it is. I gave you a kidney, Elira, a piece of my body. And while you were unconscious, while I was lying in a hospital bed wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life, you woke up and said another man's name." She flinched. "And for weeks, I told myself it was the medication, that it didn't mean anything, that I was being paranoid. But I wasn't. You were thinking about him. You've been thinking about him for 6 years while I've been right here, loving you, supporting you, trying to be enough. Kaylin, I'm not done. His voice rose. You lied to me. You told me you went to a grief retreat when you were actually shacked up in a cabin with some artist who made you feel like you could be someone else. And you know what the worst part is? I understand it. I understand why you ran, why you needed to escape. But you came back. You chose to come back. And instead of being honest, instead of telling me you were struggling, you just stayed. Half here, half somewhere else. And I've spent 6 years competing with a ghost I didn't even know existed. Tears streamed down her face. I'm sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't undo it. Sorry doesn't make me trust you again. Sorry doesn't make me stop wondering if you're going to wake up one day and realize you made the wrong choice. Elira sank onto the garage floor, back against the wall, sobbing. Kaylin wanted to go to her, wanted to wrap his arms around her and tell her it would be okay. But he didn't, because he didn't know if it would be. After a long silence, Elira spoke, voice hoarse. I don't know how to fix this. Neither do I. Do you want me to leave? No. She looked up at him, eyes red and swollen. Then what do you want? Kaylin leaned against the truck, exhausted. I want to know that you're here because you want to be. Not because you feel obligated. Not because I saved your life. But because you actually choose me. I do choose you. Then prove it. How? I don't know, Elira. That's the part you have to figure out. The next morning, Elira started therapy. She found a counselor who specialized in grief and relationship trauma. Started going twice a week. At first, she didn't tell Kaylin what they talked about. But slowly, carefully, she began to share. We talked about my dad today, she said one evening over dinner. Kaylin looked up. Yeah? About how I've spent my whole life trying to prove I'm worth staying for, and how I sabotage relationships because part of me is always waiting for the other person to leave first. Is that what happened with us? She nodded slowly. I think I kept Dorian as a backup plan, not because I loved him more, but because if you left, if you realized I wasn't worth it, I'd have somewhere to go. Someone who already knew I was broken and wanted me anyway. I know you're broken, Elira. I've always known. But you didn't see all of it. I made sure you didn't. I showed you the version of me that was manageable, fixable. I never showed you the parts that were too messy, too damaged. Why not? Because I was terrified you'd look at me the way my dad did. Like I was too much trouble. Like loving me wasn't worth the work. Kaylin set his fork down. I'm not your dad. I know. And I'm not Dorian either. I'm not going to love you conditionally. But I also can't love you if you're not actually here. I'm here now. I'm trying. I know you are. She reached across the table, hesitant. He took her hand. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. 3 weeks later, Elira's test results came back. The rejection markers had stabilized. The medication adjustments were working. Her body was finally accepting the kidney. Accepting him. When the doctor gave them the news, Elira cried. Relief. Gratitude. Fear that it wouldn't last. Kaylin held her hand in the hospital parking lot and felt something shift. Not healing. Not yet. But the beginning of it. That night, they sat on the back porch with mugs of tea, wrapped in blankets against the December cold. I've been thinking, Elira said quietly. About what? About Dorian. About why I held on to him for so long. Kaylin's jaw tightened. Okay. I think I was grieving the version of myself I was with him. The version that didn't have responsibilities or guilt or expectations. But that version was never real. She was just me running away from my life. And I can't keep running. So what does that mean? It means I'm letting him go. For real this time. Not because you asked me to, but because I need to. Because holding on to him was holding me back from actually being present in my own life. Kaylin looked at her. At the woman who'd nearly broken him. The woman who was fighting to put herself back together. I believe you, he said. You do? Yeah. I do. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I don't deserve you. Maybe not. But you're stuck with me anyway. She laughed. Soft. Real. And for the first time in months, Kaylin felt something other than pain when he looked at her. He felt hope. But hope is fragile. And 2 days later, something happened that threatened to shatter it completely. Kaylin came home from work to find Elira sitting at the kitchen table, phone in her hand, face pale. What's wrong? He asked immediately. She looked up at him, eyes wide. Dorian's in the hospital. His blood ran cold. What? His sister just called. He was in a car accident yesterday. He's in critical condition. Kaylin's mind raced. Why would his sister call you? Because apparently, I'm still listed as his emergency contact, from 6 years ago. He never changed it. They stood in silence. Kaylin could see it in her eyes, the pull, the guilt, the part of her that wanted to go to him. Do you want to see him? He asked, voice carefully neutral. I don't know. Elira. She looked at him, tears forming. Part of me does. Part of me feels like I owe him that much. But part of me knows that if I go, it'll undo everything we've been building. So what are you going to do? She set the phone down, took a breath. I'm going to stay here, with you, because going to him wouldn't be about closure. It would be about running again. And I'm done running. Kaylin crossed the room, pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since she woke up from surgery, he felt like she was actually choosing him, not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but because she wanted to. Dorian Vale didn't die. But he came close enough that the universe gave Elira a choice she'd been avoiding for 6 years. Who do you run to when everything falls apart? The answer, it turned out, wasn't as simple as she'd thought. For 3 days, Elira existed in a state of controlled panic. She checked her phone obsessively, read updates from Dorian's sister, monitored his condition through text messages that came in fragments. Surgery went well. He's stable, but not awake yet. Doctors say next 48 hours are critical. Kaylin watched her spiral and said nothing. Not because he didn't care, but because he needed to see what she'd do with the choice in front of her. On the 4th day, Elira broke. She was sitting at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, staring at her phone. I need to go, she said suddenly. Kaylin looked up from his newspaper. Where? Vermont. To see him. His chest tightened. Why? Because if he dies, and I didn't say goodbye, I'll never forgive myself. And if he doesn't die? What then? She looked at him, eyes desperate. I don't know, but I need to go. I need to see him one more time so I can actually let him go. You said you already let him go. I thought I had, but I can't stop thinking about him lying in that hospital bed alone, about all the things I never said, about whether you made the wrong choice. She flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? They stared at each other across the kitchen. Finally, Kaylin spoke. If you go, I'm coming with you. What? You heard me. If you need to see him, fine. But I'm not sitting here wondering what you're saying to him, what he's saying to you. I'm coming. Kaylin, that's not non-negotiable. Either I come or you don't go. Elira stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. They drove to Vermont in silence. 6 hours of highway stretched between them and a man who'd haunted their marriage for longer than either wanted to admit. Elira stared out the window the entire time. Kaylin kept his eyes on the road. Neither spoke until they reached the hospital parking lot. You ready? Kaylin asked, turning off the engine. No. Me neither. They sat in the truck for 5 minutes. Then 10. Finally, Elira opened the door. The hospital was small, rural, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and visitors were greeted by name. Dorian's sister, Isla, was waiting in the ICU lobby. She was younger than Kaylin expected, mid-20s, with the same dark hair and tired eyes as her brother. Elira, she said, standing. Then she noticed Kaylin. And you must be her husband, Kaylin said firmly. Kaylin. Isla's eyes widened slightly. Oh, I didn't realize you were coming. Neither did I, Elira said quietly. How is he? Awake, coherent. The doctors say he's going to recover, but it'll take months. He broke 3 ribs, punctured a lung, fractured his pelvis. Elira's hand flew to her mouth. God. He's been asking for you, Isla said carefully. That's why I called. They followed Isla down a sterile hallway to a room at the end. Kaylin felt his pulse hammering in his ears. This was it. The moment he'd been dreading since the day Elira whispered Dorian's name. Dorian was lying in the hospital bed, pale and bruised, machines beeping rhythmically beside him. When he saw Elira, his eyes filled with tears. You came. Of course I came. Kaylin stood in the doorway, watching. Every muscle in his body tense. Dorian's gaze shifted to him. You must be Kaylin. Yeah. I'm sorry. For everything. Kaylin didn't respond. Elira stepped closer to the bed. Dorian, Don't, he said, voice weak. Don't apologize. I know why you're here, and I need to say this before you do. She stopped. I lied, Dorian said. When I told you I'd wait, when I sent that sketchbook, when I answered your call. I told myself I was giving you space, respecting your choice. But I wasn't. I was keeping the door open, keeping you tied to me. And it was selfish. Tears streamed down Elira's face. Dorian, let me finish. He took a labored breath. You're not mine, Elira. You never were. You were just borrowed. And I need to give you back. For real this time. Kaylin's throat tightened. He'd expected jealousy, anger, resentment. But what he felt instead was something unexpected. Respect. Elira reached for Dorian's hand. You gave me something I didn't know I needed. You let me fall apart when everyone else needed me to be strong. And I'll always be grateful for that. But you're right. I can't keep one foot in the past. It's not fair to you. And it's not fair to Kaylin. Dorian looked at Kaylin. You're a better man than me. I don't know about that. I do. You stayed. I would have run. They talked for another 20 minutes. Not about the past. Not about what could have been. About closure. About forgiveness. About letting go. When they finally left, Elira was crying. Kaylin put his arm around her as they walked back to the truck. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I think I am. Good. She stopped walking, turned to face him. Thank you for coming with me. I wasn't going to let you do this alone. I know. And that's why I love you. Kaylin looked at his wife, at the woman who'd nearly destroyed him, the woman who was finally choosing him. I love you too, he said, and meant it. They drove home in the dark, hands intertwined across the center console. For the first time in 6 years, Elira wasn't looking backward. She was looking forward, at the life she'd almost thrown away, at the man who'd given her everything and asked for nothing in return except the truth. When they pulled into their driveway, Elira turned to Kalen. "I want to renew our vows." He blinked. "What?" "I want to marry you again, the right way this time, with no secrets, no ghosts, just us." Kalen stared at her, then smiled. "Okay. Yeah? Yeah. Let's do it." 3 months later, they stood in their backyard with 20 people watching. No fancy venue, no expensive dress, just 2 people who'd fought through hell and chosen each other anyway. When the officiant asked if they took each other, for better or worse, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, they both said yes. And this time, they meant it. Kalen kissed his wife under a string of lights hung between 2 oak trees. And when he pulled back, he saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen in years. Peace. But life isn't a fairy tale, and even happy endings come with scars. 2 weeks after the ceremony, Elira's body started rejecting the kidney again. Not drastically, not immediately, but enough that the doctors scheduled more tests, more consultations, more conversations about second transplants and living donors and what happens when the first miracle doesn't last. Kalen sat in the hospital waiting room, holding Elira's hand, and felt the fear creeping back. "What if it doesn't work this time?" she whispered. "Then we'll figure it out. Together." "I'm scared." "Me too." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't." "Promise?" "Promise." But promises are easy to make in hospital waiting rooms. The hard part is keeping them when the world falls apart. And Kalen was about to discover just how hard it could be. The human body is a fragile thing. Kalen had always known this in theory, seen it in the way engines seized when you ignored the warning signs, in the way metal bent under too much pressure, in the way things broke when you pushed them past their limits. But knowing it and living it were 2 different things. And for 8 weeks after Elira's second round of rejection symptoms began, Kalen lived it every single day. The doctors tried everything, increased her immunosuppressants, adjusted her diet, monitored her blood work weekly, then daily, then hourly when things started spiraling. The kidney, his kidney, was dying inside her. Slowly, painfully, taking pieces of both of them with it. Elira tried to stay positive, tried to smile when Kalen came home from work with flowers, tried to pretend the exhaustion wasn't crushing her, that the nausea wasn't constant, that the fear wasn't eating her alive. But Kalen saw through it. He always had. One night, 3 months after their vow renewal, Elira collapsed in the bathroom. Kalen found her on the floor, unconscious, blood trickling from her nose. He didn't remember calling 911, didn't remember the ambulance ride, didn't remember anything except the sound of the machines beeping and the doctor's voice saying words that didn't make sense. Acute rejection, kidney failure, dialysis, transplant list. Again. They were back where they started. Except this time, Kalen had already given everything he had. Elira woke up 2 days later in the ICU. Kalen was sitting beside her bed, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, holding her hand like if he let go, she'd disappear. "Hey," she whispered, voice hoarse. "Hey yourself." "How bad?" He didn't sugarcoat it. "Bad. The kidney's failing. They're starting you on dialysis tomorrow, putting you back on the transplant list." She closed her eyes. "I'm so tired." "Kalen, I know. I don't know if I can do this again." His grip tightened on her hand. "Yes, you can. What if there's no donor this time? What if—" "Then we'll figure it out. We always do." She opened her eyes, tears sliding down her temples. I'm sorry I wasted your kidney. Stop. I'm serious. You gave me a piece of yourself, and my body rejected it, and now you're stuck with one kidney for the rest of your life, and I— Elira. His voice was firm. Listen to me. I don't regret it. Not for a second. Even knowing how it turned out. Even knowing we'd end up back here. I'd do it again. Why? Because you're worth it. Every surgery. Every complication. Every sleepless night. You're worth all of it. She cried then. Deep, body-shaking sobs that the nurses said were normal, but felt anything but. Kaylin climbed into the narrow hospital bed beside her, careful of the tubes and wires, and held her until she fell asleep. The transplant list was a nightmare. Months of waiting, testing, hoping. Elira started dialysis 3 times a week. Each session left her drained, gray, barely able to lift her head. Kaylin adjusted his work schedule so he could drive her to appointments, sat with her during treatments, held her hair when she threw up, carried her to bed when she was too weak to walk. Their friends offered help. Casseroles, prayers, empty platitudes about God's timing and silver linings. Kaylin smiled and thanked them, and wanted to scream. 4 months into the wait, Kaylin got a call at work. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Hello? Kaylin Dorsey? Speaking. This is Dr. Chen from Philadelphia General. We have a potential donor match for your wife. Kaylin's heart stopped. What? A kidney became available through our deceased donor program. Preliminary tests show it's a strong match for Elira. We need you to bring her in immediately for further compatibility testing. Kaylin left work without clocking out, drove 90 miles an hour to the dialysis center, burst through the doors, and found Elira mid-treatment, hooked up to machines, reading a book. We have a donor, he said, breathless. She looked up, confused. What? A kidney. They found one. We need to go. Now. The next 12 hours were a blur. Testing, waiting, more testing, consent forms, risk assessments, surgical prep. The kidney was a perfect match. 8 points out of 8. Better than Kaylin's had been. The surgery was scheduled for the following morning. That night, lying in a pre-op hospital room, Elira turned to Kaylin. What if it doesn't work? It will. But what if it doesn't? What if my body rejects this one too? Kaylin took her face in his hands. Then we'll deal with it. Together. But you can't think like that. You have to believe it's going to work. I want to. I'm just scared. I know. Me too. She kissed him, soft, desperate, like she was trying to memorize the feeling. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. The surgery took 6 hours. Kaylin paced the waiting room like a caged animal, drank terrible coffee, stared at his phone, prayed to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. Finally, the surgeon emerged. The transplant was successful. The kidney is functioning beautifully. Her vitals are stable. She's in recovery now. Kaylin's knees buckled. He sat down hard in a plastic chair and put his head in his hands, and cried. Elira woke up slowly, groggy from anesthesia. Kaylin was sitting beside her, holding her hand. Hey, he said softly. Hey. How do you feel? Like I got hit by a truck, but also better? Is that weird? He laughed. No, that's good. She squeezed his hand. Did it work? Yeah, baby, it worked. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Really? Really. Recovery was slow but steady. Elira's body accepted the new kidney like it had been waiting for it all along. Her color returned. Her energy came back. She started eating again without nausea, started walking without exhaustion, started living again. 3 months post-transplant, they were sitting on the back porch watching the sunset. I've been thinking, Elira said. About what? About writing a letter. To the donor's family. Kaylin looked at her. Yeah? I want them to know what their decision meant, that their loss gave me a second chance, that I'm going to use it, really use it this time. I think that's a good idea. She leaned her head on his shoulder. None of this would have happened without you. You know that, right? I didn't do anything. You did everything. You stayed when you could have left. You fought for me when I didn't know how to fight for myself. You gave me a piece of yourself, and when that wasn't enough, you gave me time, and patience, and love. So much love. Kaylin wrapped his arm around her. That's what marriage is, showing up, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. 6 months later, Elira went back to work. Full time, full energy, full presence. Her students welcomed her back with cards and drawings and tears. Her colleagues threw a party. Her principal gave a speech about resilience and second chances. Kaylin stood in the back of the room watching his wife shine, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not because she survived, but because she'd finally stopped running. That night, they were lying in bed, Elira's head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy circles on her arm. Kaylin? Yeah? Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. He kissed the top of her head. I told you. You're worth it. I know. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving you right. 1 year after the transplant, they received a letter. It was from the donor's mother. Kaylin read it out loud while Elira sat beside him. Tears streaming down her face. Dear Elira, my son's name was Christopher. He was 28 years old when he died in a motorcycle accident. He was an artist, a brother, a friend, and the kindest person I've ever known. When the doctors asked if we wanted to donate his organs, I almost said no. The thought of him being cut apart, of pieces of him living in strangers, felt wrong. But then I remembered something he told me once. Mom, when I die, I want to matter. I want my life to mean something. So we said yes. I don't know if you're religious, but I believe Christopher led us to this decision. That somehow, even in death, he's still giving, still loving, still mattering. Your letter meant more to me than you'll ever know. To hear that his kidney is thriving inside you, that you're living fully because of his gift, it helps. It doesn't take away the pain, but it helps. Thank you for honoring him by living, by fighting, by choosing to stay. Please take care of his kidney, and take care of yourself. With love and gratitude, Margaret Hale. Elira sobbed into Kaylin's shoulder. He was an artist, she whispered, just like Dorian. Yeah. Do you think that means something? Kaylin thought about it, about fate and coincidence and the strange way the universe tied people together. I think it means you were meant to keep going. That even when you wanted to quit, something bigger had other plans. She looked up at him. I'm glad I kept going. Me too. 2 years after the transplant, Elira and Kaylin stood in their backyard again. But this time, they weren't renewing vows. They were planting a tree, a Japanese maple. Christopher's favorite, according to his mother, who'd become a regular pen pal. Elira dug the hole while Kaylin held the sapling steady. This feels right, she said, patting down the soil. Yeah, it does. They stood back, admiring their work. You know what I realized? Elira said. What? I spent so many years running from myself, from my grief, from my guilt, from the fear that I wasn't enough. But all that running almost cost me everything. It almost cost me you. Kaylin took her hand. But it didn't. No, it didn't. Because you wouldn't let it. She turned to him, eyes shining. I'm done running, Kaylin. I'm done looking backward. I'm done letting ghosts live in my head. I'm here. Fully. Finally. And I'm not going anywhere. Good. Because neither am I. She kissed him. Long. Deep. Full of promise. And when they pulled apart, Kaylin saw it. The woman he'd fallen in love with 13 years ago. Not the fantasy version. Not the perfect version. The real one. Messy and flawed and beautifully, impossibly alive. 3 years after the transplant, Elira got a tattoo. Small. Delicate. Just above her heart. Christopher. So I never forget, she told Kaylin. So I never take this for granted. He traced the letters with his finger. He'd be proud of you. I hope so. I know so. They built a life after that. Not perfect. Not without struggles. But real. They fought sometimes. Disagreed about money and schedules and whose turn it was to take out the trash. But they never stopped choosing each other. Never stopped showing up. Never stopped fighting for the marriage they'd almost lost. 5 years after the transplant, on a quiet Sunday morning, Elira woke up before dawn. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Kaylin, and walked to the kitchen, made coffee, watched the sun rise through the window, and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: gratitude. Not just for the kidney, not just for surviving, but for the chance to start over, to choose differently, to love better. Kaylin found her there 20 minutes later, mug in hand, tears on her cheeks. You okay? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Yeah, more than okay. Good. They stood like that for a long time, watching the sun climb higher, feeling the warmth spread across their faces. Kaylin? Yeah? Thank you for giving me a second chance, not just with your kidney, but with us. He kissed her temple. Thank you for taking it. And in that moment, standing in their kitchen with coffee and sunrise and 13 years of history between them, Kaylin finally understood something. Love isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. It's about showing up even when it hurts. It's about choosing someone again and again, even when they've given you every reason to walk away. And it's about believing that broken things can be put back together. Different than before, but maybe, just maybe, even stronger. True Hearts, this is where we leave Kaylin and Elira. Not in a perfect ending, but in a real one. They fought, they bled, they broke, but they rebuilt. And that's what love is. Not a fairy tale, but a choice you make every single day. If this story touched you, if it made you feel something, drop it in the comments. Tell me what you learned. Tell me if you've ever fought for someone the way Kaylin fought for Elira. Tell me if you've ever had to choose between the fantasy and the reality. And if you're not already subscribed to Twisted Love Tales, hit that button now. Because there are more stories like this waiting for you. More heartbreak. More healing. More truth. Until next time, True Hearts. Remember this: the people worth fighting for are the ones who fight back. Not against you, but beside you. Stay loved. Stay brave. Stay twisted.